Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us to continue this series on net zero that we began back on Leap Day of this year. We're discussing net zero targets and the path there through renewable energy microgrids. My name is Kimberly Holcomb. I head up the demand generation marketing type of activities here at Spirae. So webinars are a big part of that and a fun new routine that we've gotten into and a key piece of those efforts. So I'm really excited that you guys are joining us here today. If you missed either of the last two sessions that we did on net zero and quantifying net zero targets, don't miss out on those conversations. They are on YouTube. You can find those links there. I do have a few other members of the Spirae team here with me today. So before we get into the bulk of the content and our topic for today, let's start with some introductions. So Jackie, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey everyone, it's Jackie here. I've been part of a Spirae team as a systems engineer for over 7 years now. So today I'm really looking forward to sharing some insight with you on how demand limiting and load shifting can help to cut the cost and reduce emission, all in pursuit of achieving net zero. So let's dive in. Daniel, over to you.
Hello, I'm Danielle Mason. I'm the product marketing intern for Spirae. I started in January. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas, but here in Fort Collins, attending Colorado State University as a business major. And I'm really excited for this webinar series and to get it started today, part 3. So now giving it over to Anne.
Hi, my name is Anne Sanabro, and I'm a marketing and sales intern at Spirae, and I've been here since also January. And I am transitioning into the energy services sector from a career in environmental consulting. And I am excited to learn today.
I'm Sunil Charan. I'm the founder and CEO of Spirae. Excited to be a part of this webinar series and getting the whole team involved in this set of activities. I think net zero is top of mind for a lot of people, but what we think is very important is that there are a lot of actions that we can actually take that really moves you towards net zero and reduces costs, reduces your carbon footprint along the way. So essentially being able to get that message out and get your feedback on what you think about all of these approaches and what we can actually do in this direction. We are very excited about it, and we hope to continue the conversation as we go forward.
Thank you, team. So our topic today, as you can see here on the intro slide, is centered around demand management, load shifting, and using a technique called demand limiting to accomplish both cost and emissions reduction. So we'll discuss that harmonious relationship between effective demand limiting and net zero progress today. As you find ways to reduce costs, the majority of the time you're also reducing emissions along the way. So those aren't just emissions for you, but also for your local utility and for your community, the broader community around you as well. So this win-win-win situation is what we're going to cover in detail today. Here's our agenda for today. We'll discuss kind of the high level why demand limiting. We'll see demand limiting in action with Jackie leading the way there. And then we'll wrap it up by really tying that connection between demand limiting and net zero. So let's recap. Why the focus on microgrids for net zero? So there's two different sections here. One, the microgrid site services that really help you monitor and control your system in real time and have that wealth of data that's available for you to not only evaluate your current progress towards net zero, but also make those strategic decisions and continue to analyze and track your progress as you make system improvements and take new actions to both capture, create, and communicate value on your path to net zero. So they really provide that foundation that's necessary for that journey. In parallel to that, the microgrid cloud services that are available as well provide that data access for long-term reporting, for analyzing, and for integrating your external applications as well. So microgrids, through that data that's available from site all the way to cloud, provide a lot of visibility into what's actually happening there at your facility on the site level, and then allow you to really communicate with all the stakeholders on your net zero journey, both your current operations and then your path forward towards achieving net zero. So today we're going to look at one of those areas. So there's multiple. You have resilience, renewables maximization, renewable energy credits. There's a lot of areas that you can invest in that are along your path towards net zero. And we're going to focus in on one of those areas today, and that is demand limiting. All right, so you can go to the next slide, Jackie. She's about to show us demand limiting in action, but to set the stage, why is this technical capability so valuable in the first place? What does it accomplish, and why do you want it, really? So we're going to start here kind of at the high level of looking at the way that utilities across the globe structure their rates and kind of evaluate and categorize energy costs and structure their rates for the end users. These various rate structures really create some really substantial cost saving opportunities if you're able to manage your demand and accomplish load shifting to accommodate for the rate structure that you're under at your local utility. So the rate structures really vary for customer class. So you have, residential, commercial, industrial, sometimes even more than that as far as categories go. So that rate structure is included in your rate category. This is really crucial mostly for commercial and industrial customers, as it has the most impact on the costs at their facility. And having visibility into that and being able to operate your system at the best optimal level according to those rate structures is really crucial. So these three that are listed here, demand charges, time of use pricing, and coincident peak charges, these are three examples of kind of the most common ways that you see those additional or varying rate structures broken up by utility. So demand charges, coincident peak charges, these are additional line items that you'll see on your facility's bill, dependent on either your maximum demand or, and we'll get into the details of this in a minute, but a coincident peak. So when your bill is taken and they look at the utility's highest demand, what your demand is at that time. So those are additional line items where time of use pricing changes throughout the day. So like it says, time of use, it depends on the time of the day. Here in Fort Collins, we actually have something like that with our local utility, where there are certain times of the day where electricity is the most expensive. And in accordance with that, when the electricity is most expensive, the carbon content is also the highest because there's the highest load on that local utility. And so they are using higher carbon production sources to meet that load demand. Okay, next slide. Let's get into a little bit more details about each of these. So some of this may look familiar depending on what your utility bill, how it's structured. And so this will give you some knowledge of kind of where you sit with this and how you can use something like demand limiting to really allow you to capture some of those cost saving opportunities with your facility. So demand charges, I won't read through that whole section there, but I think this graph is a really good example. You can see here how it's split up with their rate category. And the key thing I'd like to point out is the percentage of total over there on the right. So within that utility bill, the demand charge takes up a significant portion of that overall utility bill. So if you can find a way to minimize that charge as much as possible, that is going to have the biggest impact on you saving cost at your facility. All right, so time of use pricing, like I mentioned earlier, this is dependent on time of day. So you can see here a 24-hour day, that's an example. Can you go back to that graph, Jackie? An example of how you have those off-peak hours, super off-peak hours, and then you have your peak. So there's a lot of strategies that can happen here, which Jackie's going to get into more detail of, that allow you to make decisions wisely on actions like when to charge your battery, when to discharge your battery, when to export or import electricity from the grid. So we're going to look at some of those actions you can take soon. But just keep this in mind that time of use has those different sections throughout the day of when electricity is at its peak versus off-peak hours. All right, next slide. This will show that broken up into a bill. So an example bill here. This is taken from Colorado Springs Utility, a facility requiring 4 megawatts. So you can see here those off-peak demand hours versus the on-peak. That percentage of total drastically increases with those on-peak hours of how much that's contributing to your overall cost. All right, and the last one we'll talk about today is coincident peak reduction. So this is a really good example. That top blue line that's charted there is the utility system's demand or load, and then the customer demand is the yellow below. And you can see that when the utility system's peak is highest is when they're assessing, and that's what they use to determine your bill. So whatever your demand is at that time is what's going to be used to determine your energy costs going forward. Sometimes it can put you even in a new rate class, or for, the next year is determined by that. So knowing how to keep your demand as low as possible during those times is really important. You can't do much about the amount of energy that you're using, but when you use it and the impact it has on your bill, that you can control. So a lot of times with coincident peak, people try to use things like forecasting everything to chase the peak. That can be a futile game and really frustrating. And so a better strategy that we're going to discuss today is a way to limit your overall demand and keep it in a safer margin, where no matter when that coincident peak hits, you are guaranteed that lower cost, that you're saving as much as you can at that time based on the way that you're managing your demand overall and over a period of time, and not just for that one section of time where it's being measured. All right, so let's see what that looks like on a utility bill. This next one has, once again, the rate categories, what's being metered, the rate for that, and the overall cost. And you can see that percentage of total for the coincident peak in the summer is sitting around 18%. All right, so let's talk a little bit about all the contributing factors again to net zero. Demand limiting is really just one of those. If you look over there on the chart on the left, or on the right, excuse me, you have all of these different mechanisms or strategies that contribute to your overall net zero target. Energy efficiency, managing demand, incorporating more renewables and maximizing those renewables, and achieving resilience. And all of that collectively contributes to that reduction target that you've set. Demand limiting has several different benefits. You can see those over on the left. It achieves, like we just talked about, the cost reduction by optimizing against your tariff and the way that your rate is structured. And then this one is really important as far as relating to emissions reduction as well. If you're able to shift your load and have a lot of agency over that, and to the lower cost periods, and draw less from the grid at those high cost periods, then you're also going to naturally be reducing emissions, because those high cost periods fall right in line with high carbon content periods as well. So that is not just beneficial for you at your facility and your net zero targets, but it's also helping the grid by, taking that strain off of the grid during those high load periods, and helping your community by you're not contributing to those high carbon periods, and are overall contributing to a reduction in carbon emissions for your community. So, like I said, win-win-win situation overall, and it's really a substantial benefit on your path to net zero to not just have those cost savings at your facility, but also be right alongside that, reducing your emissions. All right, so next, let's look at this in action. So we've talked about the principle of why it's important. Jackie, I'm going to hand it over to you for everything from theory to practice of demand limiting.
Thank you, Kimberly. So before we jump right in how we achieve these demand limiting actions, I'm going to demonstrate our principle of our demand limiting operations. So you can see from this chart, we have some key settings, what is the operator can choose to set. So the operator will be able to set what the demand limits are, and then this will kind of create a boundary saying we don't want to violate it, that demand limits. And also for the safety margin, that's also a user can define settings over there. So the system will try to dispatch all the controllable assets, for example, like the battery, or maximize all the renewable to avoid all the violations, say here. So if you can see this lighter blue here is what's taking the demand limits control is taking action, and then make the middle line is the blue line is the PCC reading, was also considered as the demand from the grid to be control around this control limits here. So that's our majority principle of this operation. And today during our demo, this is the kind of simplified system we set up. So it's a system combining with, it's a grid connected system with a generator, loads, some non-critical shuttable loads, and some PV panels and batteries. So normally in your system is you cannot control, you don't have a lot of control over your PV profiles, like the irradiance profiles, or sometimes you don't have a control for your load. So that's why the controllable asset may be just the battery to absorb, to discharge, to kind of doing load shifting, or make sure you are able to kind of cut down your demand. So regarding the loads, we have some real load profile. So this is a 1-day load profile. So you can see as load is kind of consuming power, that's why you can see all this negative sign in front of its values. So if during the midnight, the load is kind of keep decreasing because everybody is in sleep and all the equipments are running. But if once it's kind of hitting on the morning time, you can see the load is keep increasing here. And then especially after like 9 a.m., around 9 a.m., you go into the peak, everybody go to the work, and then they are starting to use a lot of equipment, especially during the noontime. You may turn on or air condition if it's a summertime here. And then it's going to keep going down for a while when close to like out of office time, and then at midnight you're going back to the kind of this at the starting point here. So this is how typically a 1-day load profile will look like. And regarding the PV profile, so we also have a 1 day of PV profile. So this is a wintertime PV profile. So you can see at the nighttime is you don't have any PV at all. And then around like 7 or 8 times the sunrise, you kind of gradually get all the PV, and then it become a peak during the noontime. And this DP, this downside here, it represents maybe there's cloud coming in, or somehow it's a pretty cloudy a couple of hours here. So that's why it's going down. And then from the sunset, it's going to lose all the PV here. So that's the typical one-day solar profile here. And that's how we kind of we are going to demonstrate during this demo. So your system can be very complex system. You have multiple PVs or multiple things, but what we are going to demonstrate today is just for the same one line you just saw on the PowerPoint slides. Okay. So I'm going to demonstrate before I start any demand limit control. What you are going to observe is I'm going to show you some basic monitor and control our product wave can do. So in here, in this this line is PCC reading. So this is represent the demand from the grid. So at here, because we don't have any control, so it's out of the bound. So our current users configured demand limit is at negative 300 kilowatts. But without the demand limit control, you are kind of just floating around whatever the system it is stage. So this is a steady state operations. And then I'm going to kind of make sure I kind of do some control for the batteries. I'm changing some load profile so you can have a feeling of how our system monitor control it. Okay. I'm switching back to our here, and then I'm going to show you from our dashboard trend. So you can see from here, we are pulling 250 kilowatts from the grid. So this is our current demand, and then it's supporting the 350 load, and others are coming from the battery. Okay, so if I scroll down, from the top of the line, the blue line is the battery. So battery is currently producing 100 kilowatts. And then the middle line is the PV. So as I don't have any PV solar profile put it there, so it's at 0 kilowatts. And the white line represents the demand from the grid. So it's called PCC active power reading. And the bottom line is the load. So the load is consuming consuming 503 kilowatt, 350 kilowatts. So this is how the trend it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down the gen through a wave. So I'm going to issue a base load command as a 0. So you can see right now it's producing 100 kilowatts. Once I issue this 0 set point here, you can see it jumped right into 0. So battery is kind of producing right here. If I switching back to the trend, the blue line will give me a couple of seconds. So the blue line will be dropped to 0. Yep, you can see this blue line drop to the 0 line. And then you can also see the demand from the grid is increased because we lost a battery to contribute those power. So you can see the white line is kind of overlapping with this gray line because currently all the loads are supported by the grid. And what's next is I'm going to, in the back end, I'm going to increase the load. So currently the load is at 350. So I'm going to increase the load as 650. So you can see the white line and the gray line all drop at the same time. So it's kind of at this state, we are kind of achieving this steady state operation before we can start any demand control. Okay. So what's next is we are going to start our demand limiting control. At this point, we're expecting the system to dispatch asset to make sure this demand charge reduced to around this control limits here. So you will see we are going to start in the battery as we don't have any PV profile. But once we kind of increase some PV profile, PV here, like solar profile here, our battery will kind of shut down and maximize the renewable to compensate the whole demands here. And then if I take one of the battery out of the loop, like saying that it's very low SOC, the system shouldn't impact because the whole system will be supported, kind of be able to achieve the goal by the solar. So in here, I'm going to switching to the faceplate of our demand limiting. Before we start it, let me reiterate what the settings the user can put in. So the demand limit is the hard limit. We want to put it here. So there's a negative 300 kilowatts. But with the safety margin, so it's kind of what our control was shooting for. So it gives you kind of a boundary to saying, if you have a huge low step, you can kind of absorb the kind before violated the 300 kilowatts here. Let me start the control. So once the control is started, you can see the control become active and then it's triggered because currently it's violated. So they are doing some actions. The participating asset is the battery right now. So you have two battery be able to control by the system. So if I kind of scroll down for our trend, you can see at this is previously we are at kind of the color scheme is the same as the bottom. The gray is the load profile, and the white line is the demand from the grid, and the red line is actually our the limits, the demand limits, what user put it in, and the orange line is the control limits. So that's what we are shooting for. Our demand should be kind of just around this orange side, and then the blue line is our battery, and the yellow line is our PV production. So if I'm a little bit dragging this here so we can see a bit closer. So at this stage, you can see system is just stable down. This transient is kind of battery be ramp up to be able to achieve this control limits. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to, in the back end, in our emulation, I will increase our PV profile. So to see if the battery will go down. Okay, so you can see the yellow line just goes right up and then the blue line goes down. So that means we maximize the renewable and then there's no need for the battery to maintain this control set point. I'm zooming in so you can see. I hope you can see clear. So this is how the transition happened. Okay, and what next is I'm going to make a low SOC, kind of take one of the battery out of the loop to see how it impacts the system. So let me explain the current alarm here. So you can see I have 4 alarms. So this is because I put all the gens in local mode. So the current wave cannot control generate at all. But if I'm kind of make the battery to a very low SOC, so you will see a low SOC alarm triggered. So you can see right away that the first battery ESS1 got an alarm trigger. And if you scroll up, so inside of here, you will see the participating battery, we only have 1 available. So that means this demand limited control only have 1 battery be controlled here. But you can see as we have enough PV, so the system kind of maintain a controllable range here. Okay. So as I showing after the demand limit control start, we run it into a very kind of a controllable region here. But next, what I'm going to demonstrate is have a step load. So if you have a too big step load, if you don't have experience of what the step load your system may have, so you may not set your safety margin very well. So you may cause some kind of a very short period of violation for your demand. But the system will help you to get back to this control limit. But if you don't have enough assets, for example, for this system, we just take out one of the battery because it's low SOC. So you may never achieve this to control limits. So during this kind of experiments, you will learn how big the load step it is. So you may take a other approach to make sure you don't violate the demand limit. Is that you make a smaller load step, or you may kind of increase your battery capacity, or you can change your safety margin to make sure you have enough like a headroom to be able to handle this step load change. Okay. So inside of here, let me switch back to our trend. So I'm going to issue a load change. So I'm going to give a 350 kilowatt step change. So the load will change from 650 to 1,000 kilowatts. So you can see the gray line goes right down, and then the white line, the demand from the grid is kind of violated. And zoom in. And then you can see here. You can see this white line, the demand is kind of between the control limit, but a little bit above this demand limits user defined here, because that's the full capacity what the system does. So the renewable is producing like, is producing 420 kilowatts. And then the battery, you only have one battery, and this battery is at this 300 kilowatt maximum is able to produce. So that's why you should be getting alarms saying unable to meet demand limit set point, because the whole all the controllable assets is dispatched, but you still cannot achieve this control set point. So you got the alarm. Okay. So to avoid this, I'm going to change it back to what the previous load it is. So I'm kind of reduce the load to originally 650. So you can see once the load is decreased, the battery usage, the discharge rate is decreased. So it's kind of, they were trying to avoid to use too much battery in this time. So as we kind of have a overhead room here, I think the battery will be keep decreasing to the previous kind of this state, say. So we are able to control around the control limits. Okay. So so if we don't want to have this huge violation, what you can do is, as I kind of previously briefly mentioned, you have some options to do. One, you'll be very careful about your load step. Like instead of like turning all your equipments at once, you may kind of doing just some equipment and then other part of rest of equipment later. So that will help you avoid this violation in here. So that's why I'm going to demonstrate. I only give a load step at 50. You can see it's dropped down, and then but it's still within the range, and the battery is just ramping up to compensate that load step. And what I'm going to do is, let me add back to my battery by changing it, the SOC here. So let me reset my battery's SOC. So you will have two battery available. So you can see if I reset that, and then all the SOC alarm be clear out. So you have two battery. So if I'm kind of give a load step here, so I hope the system will handle more load step than before. So let me change the load and increasing into 100,000. Okay. You still have a very transient kind of violation, but the system just get back soon. And then this, as you can see, it's different from this. You can different from this trend over here, like you see the white lines between this orange and red, but in this here you have the enough capacity, so the white line is overlapping with the orange line here, so it's kind of the control limits is achieved. So that's kind of how we are able to handle the load step. So if you really want to avoid this step, you probably want to move this orange line with your control limits up here. So make sure you can the system can carry a system can respond fast enough before the violation of the violation. So this orange line is controlled by your safety margin. Okay. So normally, if you have understand your system, that's why in your real life profile, you won't have this huge load steps. Normally the load step will be look a little bit fluctuated than the flat profile we just saw previously, but it will be able to maintain around this control limits. So let me kind of refresh our memory about our solar profile is during the daily solar profile, by zooming in one of the noontime situation is kind of, the fluctuation is a little bit up and down here for the solar. And then if it's for the load profile, the whole day load profile, if we look into the same time period of time is a noontime, and then by zooming in, will be look something like that here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switching back to our here. You can see this is a flat profile. You can see the white line is overlapping with this. I'm going to apply the real-time load profile in the back end here. So you can see it's just jumped right back to around 750 kilowatts something, but a little bit fluctuates here. So I'm going to drag it here, and then for you to be able to easier to see the fluctuation, I'm going to turn down other things. So this is how difference, like you can see the white line is the demand from the grid. It's very stable because we are dispatching the battery to satisfy kind of a chasing this change. So if I close this and loads, but if you just see the load, you can see pretty easy to see this change, the shape change. Turn all the way back. So you can see, like previously you cannot even see the white line over the orange line because it's a flat profile, but if it's with a real-time profile, your control will be kind of controlling around here. Okay. So that's the story of like the demand limiting principle of operations. So we go through without the demand limiting control, is system will always use whatever it has, dispatching at this state. But once you have a demand limit started, you control kind of, you reduce your demand, you have your battery be dispatched to be able to kind of reduce the demand from the grid, and also you maximize the renewable once you have the solar available. And then the system will handle the load step change. Depending on how your safety margin it is, it will be violated or how fast it could be get back to the control limits. And then during your normal kind of real-time operation, the control will help you to maintain this low demand situation. So this is how demand limit work in WAVE. So next is how we apply this demand limit to consider the time of use pricing. So for the time of use, you can see, as Kimberly mentioned previously, we have kind of different rates structure here during the nighttime, like 1 p.m. to 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. is the super off-peak hours. It's just 5 cents, 5 cents for if you are using the power here. But compared to the peak time during the 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. is kind of about a quarter, more than a quarter here. So you really want to shift all your loads from here to the nighttime. So you are using battery to absorb the power during this, like charging a battery over the super off peak time, and then dispatch during this peak time to supporting the your load, so you can reduce the demand in the peak hours. So in our wave, we have a capability calling a scheduler. So I'm going to switch to our schedules. So you can see I have pre-created some schedule inside of here. So there's a super off-peak hours. So in this super off-peak hours, I'm going to use our SOC management to charge our battery. So this time schedule, I'm very aligned of time of use structure is from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. That's the start and end time when I'm going to charge my battery. So what I'm going to charge the battery is I'm shooting my target SOC. I want my battery to be charged over to 80% SOC. So make sure we are ready during the peak time to dispatch it. So that's why this schedule called super off peak hour. And I also have another schedule be created. It's called on peak hour. So the on peak hour is kind of give a start your demand limit control. So if in this case is kind of I want on peak hours, I want it to be demand always below this 300 kilowatts, and then I give a safety margin at 5%, and then I will start it over like during the peak hours. The peak hours from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. So this is how we automatically be able to kind of handle this time of use situation. So we are using the scheduler plus the demand limiting and the SOC management to be able to reduce your costs to utilize this time of use pricing. Okay. And the next is about the coincident peak. So for the coincident peak, what you can do is, let me switch to the next slide. What you can do is set, instead of guessing when the coincident peak will happen, you are kind of setting a flat demand limiting, running it all the time. So once every time in this kind of green box window, once the coincident peak actually happen, your demand already below that limit you kind of have. So you don't need to worry about, oh, suddenly if your peak is really high at the coincident peak, you will get charged that much. So this gives you very kind of confidence. You don't need to kind of forecast all those kind of things. But if you want to do more accurate, you can use some external kind of coincident peak forecasting service to kind of give you more precise of timing when you want to even shift the demand more lower to kind of give you even lower charge. But that is require external service. But for the kind of general use, if you don't have that external service, our demand limit control will give you kind of a confidence saying your demand will always below that area, so you don't kind of have an unexpected high demand charge happens there. So that is kind of that is what today's demand limiting in action is demonstrate, and this is kind of moving smoothly from the theory to practice. So now I will hand it back to Kimberly for the key takeaways from our webinar.
Thank you, Jackie. Wow, that is so cool to see the system respond like that, and all the different scenarios that you put on there and allowing us to see that in action. That was amazing. Hopefully you can see how optimizing your system for cost using a principle or a technique like demand limiting is really one of the best ways to create substantial value on an ongoing daily, monthly, yearly basis on your path to net zero. Our main parting thought is that path to net zero emissions is really just paved with economic benefits. If you're investing in a system that offers long-term cost savings, net zero, even though that may be your target, it's essentially coming for free because you are just capturing so much value through investing and through using practices like demand limiting, maximizing your renewables. Maybe you have the opportunity to participate in markets or to take advantage of renewable energy credits. So all of those opportunities really feed into that net zero emissions goal that you've set. And it's an exciting journey, exciting path. Wherever you are on it today, we'd be happy to answer any questions you have after this webinar or continue discussing with you all over the next few sessions. So I'll go ahead and wrap it up with a sneak peek of what is coming next. So we hope that you guys will continue to tune in with this series. So we just covered demand limiting today. Topic of the day. Upcoming next is about renewables maximization. So Jackie hinted towards that a little bit when she talked about maximizing your solar in that sample system. We're going to be covering topics like zero export or export limiting, and then the strategy behind storing and consuming renewables. Keep tuning in. And like I said, if you have questions or comments or anything along those lines, feel free to reach out to our team. If you go to the next slide, Jackie, there's an email there and a phone number if you'd like to reach out to us directly. And we will talk to you all soon. Thank you.